So hello everyone, my name's Danny Kennedy. I'm the president and co-founder of Sungevity, and I want to start with the apology that I am having to talk to you in English and not in Dutch. Really appreciate the fact that you can come to a country and assume most people will be able to understand me, and sorry to have to do that, but thanks for listening and listening to the story. And I want you to leave with a book or intention to buy a book called Rooftop Revolution, because I think in it you'll find lots of inspiring stories about how you can get involved as well in spreading solar and sunshine through people's lives, which is what really this industry is all about. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, and then you probably already said this in the introduction, get into a discussion, because that's the way I like to be with a crowd. But to start, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and about Sungevity, the company, and how we sort of think of the electricity space that we're in. Because ultimately, what we do is create electricity service, which is wonderful. It provides light and entertainment and education and mobility these days with the electric vehicles I see zipping around Amsterdam. That experience that we've all taken for granted and had in our lifetimes is something that's pretty new and wonderful in the world, and that we want to spread to the billion-plus people that don't currently benefit from it. But we want to do it without causing problems, which is how we've done it to date. So a lot of my rave is about, you know, how can we get electricity service out there to the masses for less, save them money, make it better, cleaner, and go across the globe. What I wanted to start with is just a simple diagram, and forgive me, I don't use PowerPoints because I find them boring, so instead I hold up pictures. This one is how we make electricity today. All electricity really is solar energy. It all falls free from the sky at some point. It's just that most of what we currently get today became a plant about 200 million years ago through a thing we call photosynthesis. It's actually not very efficient in terms of converting photons to a caloric value. But anyway, photosynthesis has obviously been very successful. You know, vegetation kind of inhabits most of the globe. A lot of those plants died, were buried in mud in the dinosaur era, and then they became fossils, which is why we now call them fossil fuels. And they lie in pockets all around the globe, and we go and dig them up. And if you've ever been to a mine or an oil rig or a gas fracking site, you know that that's kind of ugly, you know, never a pleasant thing for the people whose land that was. And we dig them up to burn them, which is this really inefficient thing also. Burning, incomplete combustion, has a whole lot of byproducts, soot, particulate matter, and most notably carbon dioxide, because it releases all the carbon that the plant trapped in photosynthesis. So that's all this stuff. And you know what we do with the burning of the plant material and the fossil fuels? We boil water, which just, you know, when you think about it, just sounds really sort of primitive. You know what I mean? Like, wow, this cool thing called electricity and the internets and television brought to you by boiling water. It's kind of a 19th century technology. It is, actually. It was invented in 1894 by a Briton. And if for no other reason, I make this joke in America and it goes down well, we should adopt photovoltaics because they were invented by an American. But anyway, so the steam turbine is this machine that takes the boiled water and creates something called electricity. And then, because we've tended to put these machines out in the distance because we don't like what they do and the pollution that comes with them, they want them to be out of sight and out of mind, they have to ship them a long, long way to market, or ship their product, which is this electricity service we're talking about. And it goes all the way to market and gets transformed to a useful condition in your local neighborhood and distributed to your house, and you use it to power your lives. And that's kind of how most of the world gets electricity. Here's a fact for you that'll shock you. 49% of water in the United States goes into boiling water for steam turbines. 49% of the water diverted to human use. 42% goes to agriculture, the rest to all other uses. So the largest consumer of water in America, which if you know anything about the geography of America, doesn't have a lot of water to go around and is going to have less over time, is going to boiling water in steam turbines. So it's a big, wasteful, silly technology. It worked for a while, don't get me wrong. We've benefited for a century from this technology, but we haven't really improved it. We haven't really exposed it to competition, say in America where it was generalized. The deal was the industries that got to sell the service of electricity got a regulated monopoly over their market. They weren't required to compete. So for the better part of a century, they've been using the same machine that they had back in 1920. They put them in 1950 and they've been running them ever since. So they standardized around a certain incumbent technology set and they haven't really improved it. The good news is the sort of hero in the piece came along, which was a different machine that does the same trick, takes solar energy and turns it into useful power in your house for your lifestyle at the point of use on your roof. That's the machine there. It's a flat plate technology. It's a semiconductor. It has no moving parts, no water required, and it produces electricity at 15% efficiency, photon to electron. 15%. You know when they say, oh, solar's not efficient enough? I'm waiting for the next generation of solar technology. Oh, are you? Oh, really? You mean the one that can take something falling free from the sky and convert it to useful electricity at 15% efficiency today? You want to wait till it's 30%? Why? The machine that you rely on takes photosynthesis, which is less than this, waits 200 million years, boils water at a rate of efficiency which is just ridiculous. So this machine rocks. Like I said, it was invented in America in 1954. It's just 5 decades ago. So it's not a surprise that it's taken a while to mature. Technologies do take a while. And adoption of technologies takes decades when they're really broad-scale technologies. And they take longer when they're resisted by incumbent technologies and vested interests that make money and profit out of the old way of doing things. Think about the adoption of the automobile versus horse and buggies. The horse and buggy guys really didn't want that to happen, and they fought it for a while. Think about cell phones versus landline telephony. Think about mainframe computing versus the internet and the cloud. Those sorts of transformations do take time. This one's a very big one. This is how we run our societies and power. About 80% of developed economies go through electricity-based businesses. So there's a huge amount of value and there's a huge amount of vested interest in this transformation. The book is basically an argument that it is the biggest economic story of our time. This is the biggest thing that will happen. This is bigger than Google. This is bigger than Instagram and Facebook, would you believe? This is bigger than this is a crazy thing to say, but it's sort of bigger than fire. By which I mean it does what fire did for us without burning stuff. Like, if you think about what fire was good for, it was to light the cave and to cook the food, to fix the nutrients, to allow the semi-nomadic hominoids to settle in place, and then to transform their habitats and to develop cultures and to do other things with the light and the heat and the ability to transform the landscape that fire gave them. So the ability to strike a fire was a huge evolutionary step. And then more recently, a couple of centuries ago, we got the ability to put fire in a wire. So all those services, light, warmth, the business of transforming things with electric motors, entertainment, education, all the other ancillary services that have flowed from the electricity revolution, the industrial revolution that was powered by electricity, those have been of huge benefit to humans, but they've had this cost of pollution, local land impacts, all that good stuff that we know. So this is fire in a wire without fire. This is the power to light your life, to change, to heat, to do mobility, to do all those services without having to go through burning something first. So I believe it's the next big evolutionary step. And that's kind of one of the reasons I believe there's a rooftop revolution afoot in the world. One of the other things about this technology that I think is really special is that it's modular. It makes it different and harder to understand, but my watch is photovoltaic. I haven't wound it or placed a battery in it for 10 years because it just needs enough sunlight to charge up and it runs. My bag is photovoltaic or a solar cell. It charges my phone. And my house is photovoltaic. Not that we're in my house, but on the roof of my house there's a solar system which powers my house. So you can scale this technology to meet the demand for the service of electricity. The other technologies in the space tend to be oversized. They call it base load. They build more capacity than is required to provide the power to the end user so that there's no times where they're caught short, where there's a demand that can't be met. So they oversupply base load, and then they have to create false demand to grow it. And there's been this consistent sort of game to chase and catch up electricity supply and demand. Whereas this technology allows us to match demand to production. And that's quite a different concept in terms of producing electricity, and it completely changes the game with the distributed architecture that's allowed by a modular technology like this to really transform how we power our lives. And that distributed architecture is the thing that people struggle with the most. They can't imagine how every home, every building, every street post, every piece of clothing potentially, the car you drive, the rickshaw I came in yesterday to a newspaper interview, all these things will produce their own power. And that is a very transformative thing. It's also potentially very emancipatory. Without overstating it, the potential of that technology to be owned by the users of that technology is very empowering in a political and figurative sense as well as a literal sense. You can democratize the business of electricity, the power in our lives, because we can own it. And that's one of the most exciting things about this tool, this technology. In Germany, the world's largest market, just over there, 27 gigawatts of power capacity, 50% of which is owned by the people whose homes and houses it's on, or the farms that it's in. So rather than being dependent on regulated monopolies or other monopolies in the fossil fuel industry that have concentrated wealth and power over a century, this is a technology that sits in the hands of the users, which is a very good thing. And the other good thing I wanted to stress about it is it's very labor intense. And that sounds negative, but actually when you think about it, in our society today, jobs are a premium. Jobs are important. And this is a business and a product that requires more jobs per unit of electricity than the other way of producing electricity, that dumb and dirty way. Because basically the dumb and dirty way is big boilers of water out in the desert in America, as an example, that don't employ a lot of people. Very capital intense and not a lot of humans involved in that transmission system. Whereas this tool needs to be marketed, sold, financed, deployed, installed and maintained in the community. And so it creates jobs that aren't offshoreable and are there as long-term jobs. These things will last. We don't really know how long they'll last. They've only been around 50 years, and reliability tests suggest that they'll work well past 50 years life. We only warranty them for 25 years, so their economic life is 25 years. But if you ask some of the experts in the photovoltaic manufacturing world, they think they'll be working a century from now, meaning sunlight falling on the photovoltaic will be turning into electricity. What is the price of that electricity if it's working for 100 years? It's sort of boom, your brain just blows up. You try to model that and do the discount rates and it doesn't work. It's basically free. We've got a machine that sits in the sun and produces free electricity. That's why it's going to spread across the roofs of Europe and America and the world. The cost thing is the key. That's my last little diagram. So this is real numbers. This is our numbers from Longevity in the United States. We lease most of our systems, so we sell homeowners solar systems, but we do it on a lease, meaning they put no money down and pay us a monthly fee for a contract. Different system, different culture, you know, credit requirements are different. The propensity for families to own versus lease is greater in the States, and also the systems are bigger in the homes in the US. They're about 5 to 6 kilowatts average, whereas here it's less than 3 kilowatts for homes, or something of that order. But my point is that as a lease, you get a price per kilowatt hour rather than a price per kilowatt as the key metric. And price per kilowatt hour is actually what we're talking about. When we're talking about electricity, it doesn't matter what the kit costs, it matters what the service costs. Who here knows what you pay in Amsterdam for electricity?
24 cents.
Wow.
27.
Normally when I ask that question in a crowd of Americans, no one raises their hand. That's really funny. I guess this is a very well-informed audience. Okay. And 24 cents is expensive, so it hurts, right? That bites your butt, you know, your hip pocket. Beg your pardon?
A lot of it's taxes.
A lot of it is taxes. So it is around the world. You know, like Point is, electricity costs expensive and it's going up. Solar electricity costs going down. This is real numbers. This is fossil fuels back a century ago, standardizing steam turbines to spread throughout the economy, actually became cheaper for a little while, and then became more expensive because basically the input cost is fuel, and fuel costs stuff, and they're scarce, so they're driven by scarcity, and when you use more of a finite thing over time, it becomes more expensive. That is true. That's an economic rule. That will continue. So prices go up. There's a range of prices you pay. In Hawaii, you pay a lot because you're paying for oil. You're not paying for coal. In Arizona, you pay cheap because it's sort of still a lot of coal, for example. But the range has grown to a point where retail consumers of electricity are paying somewhere between, say, 15 and 35 cents a kilowatt hour across the United States. Solar's invented halfway through that timeline. It first gets used for very high-end applications like satellites and stuff in space. Doesn't get mass-produced very much, but it's a semiconductor, so every time it does, it gets cheaper and more powerful, each generation of production. Kind of like Moore's law in silicon chips. There's been a similar learning curve in the manufacture of solar panels. Every doubling of volume has resulted in an 18% reduction in the end price of the product. So about 5 years ago, we started getting serious. We just started mass producing it, like semiconductors can be mass produced. And the price, lo and behold, went through that same learning curve. It just accelerated. And now my company sells electricity to people for about 18 cents a kilowatt hour, depending on the cost of capital. Cost of capital is actually the big piece in the cost structure now. So you look at this graph and tell me that the future is not solar. Because cost is what drives the market, right? If we're in a world of neoliberal economics, we believe the market will reign. Well, unless you believe those curves are going to go down for some reason because there's going to be a new allotment of coal and it's going to be cheap and abundant, which of course the gas guys are hyping and claiming in the United States right now, but is not true. Or you think this curve is going to go up because for some reason semiconductor manufacturing will become more complex rather than simpler as it scales, then that curve is going to go down over time. It's what we call grid parity, but I just like to demonstrate it here. This dotted line is today. You have to look at this and conclude the future of solar is bright. Where that goes, exactly what scale, I'm not going to name numbers, crystal balls and stuff, but it's clearly a big economic opportunity because we're talking about a $5 trillion electricity market around the world, and a lot of it is going to go solar. In America, just as an example, we're less than 1% of the supply of electricity. We're likely to be 10 to 20%, depending on the state, within a decade. Like that's PG&E and Public Utility Commission's numbers in California, as an example. They believe we'll be 20% of the supply. Germany has gone to 20% of the supply, 52% on a good day. I'll take questions at the end if that's okay. So, point being that we're going to grow from 1% to double digits at least, I think far more than that, as this modular technology spreads virally through the community and is adopted en masse. That's really good because A, it's clean electricity, not polluting. B, it's a job creation engine. You know, if we're 100,000 workers at 1% of the electricity supply in America, think about what we can be when we're 10 or 20% of the electricity supply. Potentially millions of workers, which is a value in America in this recession that can't be understated. The coal industry, by comparison, 33% of electricity supply, 60,000 workers in coal mining, 150,000 in total, in all the coal mining, all the railway workers, all the power plant workers, everyone involved in the ancillary industries around coal-based power. So they employ 150,000, we employ 100,000, they're a third of the electricity, we're 1% of the electricity. For many reasons, I think that's going to be something that gets a lot of political will behind it. So the economic opportunity is huge, the job creation potential of it is huge, and the last thing I'll sort of just stress is that people want it. People love this stuff. It's kind of funny to be in a business that's selling something that kind of is inherently good, like sunshine, which is basically what we sell, is a cultural value across all time and all peoples. Sunshine's sort of been health and hygiene and goodness and light. It's what grows the plants we feed ourselves on, and it's what brings us warmth and we love to shine on our face. And that popularity, it sounds silly to talk about it, but it is a real concept which I think drives the demand for this rooftop revolution when manifest in consumer demand and political will. So the popularity is remarkably stable and undinted. There are many polls over many years, and people want more solar than they've got in the mix. We just took a poll last week to test the American population's pulse on this subject, because we've had a year of very intense propaganda against the solar industry. So we called 1,000 homes and did a survey and said, how are you feeling about solar power? You know, just open questions, wanting to see if they deemed it a failure, whether they'd bought the Solyndra bug. I don't know how much you heard about Solyndra here, but in America, it was saturation for about a month this time last year, and it's been consistently a talking point in the political campaign of this election season. So they've been talking down Solyndra and solar as a result, and Obama as a result. It was sort of this syllogism of Solyndra failed, therefore solar's failed, therefore Obama and his energy policies are dead. And that's been dominant and a very big discourse in the debate. What we found through our poll is that public support for solar has increased from 8 to 9 out of 10 Americans wanting more of it. They didn't buy it. They didn't believe the hype. Google found the same thing. They looked for searches in the search engine histories for Solyndra and didn't find a lot of people took up on that conversation and believed that. So, like I say, the sort of belief and desire for this better, simpler, cleaner, faster way of creating energy supply is very strong in our society. It creates jobs, which is very clear in our society, and it's also fundamentally a sort of a more secure technology set, by which I mean it is more less brittle, more safe as a technology solution for a society to depend on 1,000 points of light rather than one big central station. It's an architecture which makes more sense from a portfolio approach. It's why the US military is getting behind it. It's why a lot of sort of future designs of the grid are supporting the adoption of solar. It's more reliable. Germany has increased the number of hours of uptime with the penetration of solar rather than decrease them. If you look at the graph of brownouts and blackouts in the German grid and electricity supply, it is a more reliable electricity supply where there has been more penetration of solar on rooftops, because it's interspaced in the community and it supports the maintenance of the electricity supply rather than what happens when you're dependent on one distant generator and the system has some cascading failure and breakdown. For example, in the US, we had in July of this year, Pepco, a big utility in Maryland and Virginia and the area around Washington, DC, the capital of the free world, they had a blackout that lasted a week. This is 1 million Americans sitting around the capital of the country in a heat wave in July without power. And the guys in charge of the grid were just like, oh, can't do anything about that. We've had a series of breakdowns and failures in our system. That insecurity and instability could have been staunched, could have been prevented by just having about 500 megawatts more solar through that grid to reduce the sort of cascading failures that occur when you have a situation like that. So the security value, which in a political slogan becomes energy independence, is a huge motive cause for the uptake of solar as well. And that's what the rooftop revolution is. Basically, it's this sort of social movement which demands this for all those good reasons above, and I won't repeat them, but just to describe the rooftop revolution, it's this phenomena that we see with solar wherein people tell their neighbors and their friends and their family to go solar. It's a very clear pattern if you look at it geographically, like where solar is adopted. You're probably starting to see this as the market matures in the Netherlands, that it's on a street. You won't see one system here and one system on the street over and one system on the next street over. It's 3 systems on this street. It's neighbors talking to neighbors, and it's friends and families getting behind this and driving this. So what one of our key strategies as a business is to try to feed this social phenomena, this viral spread of this stuff, we use social networking strategies. We're sitting in California in the middle of Silicon Valley. We hired the CMO of LinkedIn and we said, go do your thing, be like a disease and spread throughout the community. And he's built all these tools that turn the interface with the solar system into a networking platform for people to communicate with their friends and families about why they feel good about this, to share their peer pride in going solar. And it's amazing how they do it. I mean, they sit looking at their monitor, checking out how much electricity they're producing, kind of almost like a game, trying to engage their friends and family, getting them an iQuote, which is the system we use online to design and engineer a solution for a home, telling them, I've saved this much money so far, or I've saved this much CO2, sharing it on Facebook, linking to it on LinkedIn, doing all these things that they do. He reckons that they look into that portal more than the average user looks into LinkedIn, which is a pretty amazing statement that it's become that. And it turns these consumers into both producers of their own power and propagators or promulgators of this sunshine online and spreading this rooftop revolution. So we're trying to just feed that viral phenomenon, and I guess to end, that's where we want to work with you guys in the Netherlands, with you and your organization, the Climate Streets Initiative, trying to get crowdfunding solutions, get ways that the community can engage. I know that there's a large rental population in the Netherlands, not as many homeowners as a percentage. How can people in multi-tenant dwellings indulge in this business? How can we all get to be part of the solar economy and the rooftop revolution would be what I'd love to hear your ideas and discussion about. And that is the end of my lesson. You want to ask questions?